If you want to follow Christ, and if you want to find the peace that God offers, be like the younger son. That might be strange at first, because I know a lot of people identify with the older son. We do this in our lives when we rashly judge others, or maybe we've been in the faith all our life and say, how these people do these things. We do this with our siblings, people in my own family who would, every time this gospel would come up, would say, the older son's right, I just don't get it. He has a legitimate point. But that's not the teaching of Jesus, is it? Jesus says to be like the younger son, really. That's the point of the story. Part of the point. It's related to another story. This doesn't seem so far-fetched. There's another very similar story that Jesus tells about a publican and a Pharisee. And they're both praying in the temple. And you know the story. And who is a publican? A publican is a tax collector. And he's not just some government bureaucrat. That would be better. That would be good. Maybe. But he's not. He's a hired contractor who's been hired by the government to go out and collect taxes, of which his pay doesn't come from the government. It comes by his fee for collecting the taxes from you. That's what a publican is. That's what Matthew, the evangelist, is before Jesus calls him. He was a thief, really. Kind of an organized crime sort of character. A legitimized government thief. That's what they were, and that's why they were despised. Well, he's praying in the temple, and next to him is the Pharisee. The Pharisee who does everything well and cries out to the Lord, thank you. Thank you for not making me like him. But what does Jesus say about the two? Because the publican prays and asks for mercy. Jesus says the publican, the tax collector, goes away justified. There's a transformation. There's a repentance. There's a change of heart. And we assume a change of action. He's going to change his life. He's the one that we are to imitate. And so it is here also. The older son does not budge. He has no mercy. He doesn't get it. He doesn't have the perspective of the father, and in the end he becomes like the younger son. Because he has everything the father has, but the father who shares everything with him, he doesn't understand that their life is one, that he himself is the one that ends up lost and dead. Dead of heart and dead of spirit. But the younger son, in his sin, is wrong and goes away, but he realizes when he hits, as we would call today, rock bottom, doesn't he? There's a famine in the land, and he wants to eat the swill that the pigs are eating. That's what he wants. And he realizes, oh my goodness, what have I become? I'd be better off going and being the least in my father's house again. This isn't a real story. Jesus tells 3 parables in a row here in the Gospel of Luke. And these stories are here for a reason. St. John Paul II had called the Gospel of Luke the Gospel of Mercy, which is so appropriate this year as we meditate all year on the Gospel of Luke, and what's called Year C in our cycle coincides with this year of mercy. And there's 3 parables here speaking about the profound mercy of God, the attitude of God himself, and the attitude that we should have. But let's come back to the Son in his suffering. His suffering there. The suffering that he's brought upon himself brings about this repentance. There are other kinds of darkness and suffering and trial that can bring about a repentance too. Now, what is repentance, though, before we go on? We use repentance a lot, conversion. Is that just at the moment when someone's come back to the faith? Repentance is something we do all of our life. And it's a turning towards God, a continual journey towards him, to put away sinful passions, destructive behavior, and to seek God. We never forget that. And it's not something that happens once. It happens our whole life. And not just the things that bring us to confession, but turning away from the things that are harmful in our life or towards others and seeking God. We're always growing in this, and there's a labor there. And so this son, the younger son, is at this point, and he begins this journey back to the Father. And as he brought there, that low point because of his sins. Other people are brought to low points because of trials, often permitted by God. Sickness, loss, death, these sorts of things. And there's a third type that we can undertake with God. And those are sacrifices, penances, that we choose. And I mention this third one because we're in the midst of the season where we do this. Penance, sacrifice, fasting, almsgiving. Remember, we spoke about that at the beginning of Lent. And this is a great time on Laetare Sunday, with its rose vestments, to remind us of the halfway point and to renew those things, or to do better. We always, most of us, I think 98% of us, have usually, at this point, say, I need to try harder and do these things a little bit better. Why? To seek God, of course. To take on fasting, almsgiving, prayer, extra sacrifices, is to be like Christ. Because you see, the first two ways, like the younger son, it's his own sin that brought him to his knees. Sometimes it's those trials in life. But sometimes we need those other things to remind us that we are not self-sufficient. To remind us in the midst of our own sin and our struggle with sin, to get out of the cycle of sin, our own struggles with sickness and loss and whatever pain we bear. We need to be reminded, or even if none of these things are happening, we need to be reminded that we are not self-sufficient. And we're not supposed to be. To do the supernatural works that God calls us to, we need supernatural grace. And we need to ask Him not to send it, but that our hearts, our minds, our souls be open to this mystery. That we are open to the transformation He offers. The Father's mercy in this story is constant and unrelenting. The Son, both the younger son and the older son's heart are closed. Until in that pigsty, the younger son opens his heart. And that's what we need. To open our heart to the power of God. Whether in trial or not, prayer helps that. You're here, we're praying, we're doing much more than many in the world. We bring this time not only to worship God here, but a time of silence and seeking His grace. This is good. A little bit more is very helpful. You know, when we bear things, difficulties, the difficulties I've mentioned, or the burden of the cycle of sin that some of us are sometimes stuck in, or even a penance that has gone on too long. You know, if you gave up coffee or drinking or food, or different people do amazing things. Don't talk about it, but sometimes we hear about them. What happens? If we do these things without doing that extra part of seeking God, we might get resentful, angry, irritable. In fact, even fasting itself can make us irritable, especially fasting, if we undertake it without, then, extra prayer. Abstinence can make us irritable. Abstinence from things we like sweets or coffee or cheese or something. And make us irritable. Because those are legitimate things denied to us. But did we not choose those things? Even the trials sent upon us. We know that God has a plan for us. Why do we get so irritable? Why do we get so angry and resentful? One Russian writer had spoken about a time when these men had Lent in Russia is very strict, and they undertook that fast. No animal products. But they were in a place where they couldn't go to the Divine Liturgy. They couldn't go to Mass. And he wrote this: if fasting is not accompanied by prayer and increased spiritual life, it merely leads to a heightened state of irritability. It is natural that the servants who took their fasting seriously and were forced to work hard during Lent, while not being allowed to go to church, were angry and irritable. We're supposed to be growing in charity. We're supposed to be growing in mercy. And all of our practices should be directed to that, works of mercy for ourselves and for others. But it must be strengthened with prayer. And what is that? Yeah, I'm not asking you to do 3 hours of prayer. Spend all day tomorrow on prayer. Wouldn't that be nice? Maybe it would be. Maybe it would become tedious. We just need to spend time with God. I mentioned the year of mercy. Do you know what the Ark of the Covenant used to be called? The mercy seat. Because while it was a box, it was also formed like a throne where the presence of God sat. And that's what we need to make here, a place that God's mercy dwells. And what does that? Good works do, somewhat. Prayer, or rather sacrifice, penance, etc. But time with the Lord. A little bit of time goes a long way to making a place for God. Without prayer, all of our good works don't have value. And some, especially sacrifices or trials that we should bear, we say, take up our cross, when they're not combined with prayer, can actually be discouraging and harmful. It doesn't take much to kneel before the Lord or sit in our chair and ask Him for strength, to thank Him for the gift of His grace, and ask Him for help in whatever we're going through. We don't have to have special words to do that. And if we want words, there are many in the Mass, in the Rosary, and in the Scriptures. We don't have to say it right. We just have to come before Him with this attitude of the younger son. That, Father, I have sinned against you. I no longer belong to your Son. Or, I am overwhelmed by the trials you sent me. Or, I just can't change and I need your help. I need you to open my heart. And this goes such a long way to that transformation of the Lord, so we can be like the younger son and really transform and see how weak we are without Christ. See how much we long for Him and truly hunger for His presence in our life and His peace, so that we too hear the words in our mercy, before we're even finished asking for mercy, that we hear the words of the Father. You are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. You were dead, but you have come to life again. You were lost, but now you have found. This is why this reading we find on this Sunday, the Sunday that the color of the vestments and the text of the Mass indicate that we should rejoice. Should we rejoice because Easter's coming? Well, we know that. No, the joy is in repentance. The joy is found in all places, again, where the younger son is in that pigsty. The joy is found when he discovers that light of Christ. The joy is found when he returns to his Father and finds life in His loving embrace. Well, that's what we seek. And it's that way, not in his sin, but in the joy of continuing to turn toward and seeking the Lord, that we should be like the younger son.